Everybody, welcome back. Photography Live and Uncut. Yeah, my name's Paul Griffiths. You know that bit. But my guest today, and I'm really, really thankful, Caleb Asch. Caleb, welcome to Photography Live and Uncut.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
There's no problem at all. And I've got to thank you again, as we did before, because you stepped up to the plate. I had a cancellation literally yesterday, and I knew you were floating around on my latter episodes, and you very kindly stepped up. So really a big, huge thank you for that. Especially you're basically on the other side of the States to me. And I'm in the UK. You're on the west coast of America. Is that right?
Yes, and I've enjoyed your work for some time now, so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. There's no need for you to say that, but thank you. Much appreciated. Caleb, my favorite question to start the show off. Can you remember, was there a camera in your household when you were just a young kid?
Not a still camera. My dad had a, I believe it was Super 8, and it was the type of camera that you had to wind up the spring. You know, a little handheld counter, and in fact, we had those films transposed to video. I mean, actually to digital now, but you had to wind. It had a little, like a great big key that you had to wind up first before you could shoot it.
Lovely. And that was your father's pride and joy. I suppose no way could you touch that.
No, you know, no, he didn't let us anywhere near it. But they did buy us. I think it was for my 12th or 13th birthday. I got a Brownie camera, the little box camera that you would take pictures and send the whole camera to Kodak.
Yep.
And they would then develop them and send you back the snapshots.
Amazing.
Dating myself.
How times have changed, eh? How times have changed. Now, in sort of the pre-show we were chatting about, which I'm really looking forward to talking about it. You first started taking photographs on the set of Star Wars. We'll talk about that instance. So nothing really, photography-wise, caught your imagination until your early 20s.
Yes, you know, and part of the reason I did it was because one of my good friends bought his camera, and it was a Pentax. I remember exactly, it was a Pentax, and he was taking these black and white pictures, and you know, I thought they were pretty cool, and I wanted to do that.
That's lovely. So let's go back to the old school days then. Basically, through school into college. What did you study?
I went to college. You
didn't go to college?
Nope.
No, strange. So what did you study up at school?
Well, you know, I was never really an academic. You know, in school, I was, you know, I was, let me put it this way. I was voted the school's best athlete in both elementary, what they call middle school now, but we call junior high school, and high school. And I was never on any teams.
Oh.
I was a guy that could run faster, jump higher, and especially do more chin-ups than anybody else.
So why weren't you selected?
I didn't want to go on to teams because, well, you know, right after junior high school, during junior high school, it was, for me, 1968. So I started growing my hair out. And, you know, they wanted me to cut it. And, you know, I was too interested in adopting, at that time, a teenage hippie lifestyle. And you know, okay, I can't be on your team. Put up any of your athletes and I'll out-chin them.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. So you were a bit of a rebel then by the sound of things.
Yeah, I was an arrogant, rebellious, you know, and I got to admit, it helps me in my photography today. I was the type of kid that would way rather ask forgiveness than permission.
There you go. So tell me, when from leaving school up to this magical age of 23, 24, when you're on the set of Star Wars, what happened in between that time? What did you get up to?
I was actually quite fortunate. You know, my father was involved with broadcasting. And during my senior year in high school, I got a job at a local television station, and as a log boy, which meant that, you know, the television, every television station, I think to this day, is on a schedule. You know, they have a certain, and the schedule is fairly detailed. When the commercials are going to run, how long they are, the beginning of each show, the end, all that stuff. and I would make Xerox copies of it and deliver it to all the different departments that needed it. And during this time I was there was a union strike. And they made me a cameraman, a boom operator, excuse me, and in those days, everything was done on I think it was 2-inch videotape that had these great big decks that needed to be queued up. So I was what they call a VTR operator. If you go back, I don't know if he ever made it to Europe, but there was there was a gossip columnist. Her name was Rona Barrett. I was her cameraman. And there was a guy named Ben Hunter who did this Ben Hunter's Matinee and played old movies. Okay. It was, in fact, the first place I saw Olivier's Henry V.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, that I did that, and then I went to work in the film industry when I was early 22, and because at that time there was an industry around film, and in Los Angeles there were, I think, 6 or 7 film laboratories, because we then had to feed, everything was shot in film, then made into a movie. You had to send prints out around the world. I worked in a very small place that did, 90% of the output we did was hardcore pornography, and 10% were 10%.
The family show, Caleb. Let's keep it.
I'm not going to say. I'll just tell you that. But it was hard. In those days, the peep shows were done on Super 8mm film that came in these 100-foot reels, and you would go in and put in your quarter or whatever they charged, and it would run, and you would watch your porn. And the other 10% was armed forces stuff. I mean, Paul, when I tell you, I watched the first film of when somebody had the bright idea to put a camera on a missile to see what it looked like from the missile's point of view.
Okay.
And so we did that. And also, none of us had any clearance. We all had long hair down to our middles of our backs, and we're all hippie guys, and yet they were doing films on how to dismantle a warhead. And needless to say, in this day and age, security is way different than it used to be.
I tell you, that reminds me of a story, because my very first guest was Frederick Van Johnson, and he, in actual fact, he picked up a camera when he joined the Air Force. I think it was the Air Force. And they just had to learn how to use this Nikon F3 and all the gear and all that business. And one particular episode, they were taken up in this helicopter up very high, and they had to take photographs of this missile launch. And it was a real big thing. And he said, so there we are in this helicopter, and we're taking these photographs of the rocket and just about to be launched, and as it launches. And he said, and it gets about 200 yards in the air, and it explodes.
Oh my God.
And he said, that the helicopter, the chopper really shook, and the pilot managed to recover. And he said, we went away and landed safely. All the film was taken away from the cameras. He said none of those images were ever shown. Obviously, big, huge secret, because of American missile going up in flames. They wouldn't want to show that, would they?
Sure.
But it makes you wonder what's going on now. Would they even possibly have taken photographs of it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
The stuff that we don't know.
Excuse me. So now you're getting into the film industry, and I suppose this is your natural lead into Star Wars, where
it was.
I thought you were going to say you were one of the stormtroopers or something like that, but you weren't. You're a high flying technician.
I was. I got to have, I got to see George Lucas at the coffee machine every morning. Although he didn't say anything, we would all say good morning, and he would smile and nod and then scurry away, because he is a famously known shy person. I was, it's funny because it also coincided with part of my step into my ongoing spiritual practice and spiritual journey. I did something in the day, back in the 70s, there was one of the first big movements of the consciousness movement at the time was a thing called EST, Earhart Seminars Training, named after Werner Earhart, who is now living, I think, in either Europe or Canada. And it grew to be huge. And he basically left the States in disgrace. He has been cleared of all the nefarious charges he was charged with at the time, but he's smart enough to know that when you reach that sort of pinnacle of fame, because he was really quite famous, the rich and famous and stars all hobnobbed around him, and you fall, you're basically gone.
Yeah.
But I met the guy that hired me while I was working for him for nothing. You know, they called it service, and it was. And you know, he kept asking me, you know, you work in film, can you do this? Can you do that? And you know, my experience was fairly limited, but I was cocky and arrogant, and I said, and I looked him square in the eye, and I truly felt it at the time. I said, I can do anything with film. And sure enough, about 6 weeks later, he goes, look, we're doing this film. It's called Star Wars. It's a little campy, because none of us knew. No. It's this little campy, you know, done by the same director who did American Graffiti and THX 1138. And you know, you can be, you know, it'll be a union gig. It's 6 days a week. It's 11 hours a day. I was like, where do I sign?
Yeah.
So I started. I started the first week in December of December 1976, and we worked till like 2 days before the premiere, tweaking and redoing and stuff like that. And it was it was the best job I have ever had.
Yeah.
You know, it was a bunch of guys. Most of them everybody was young, except Gary Kurtz, the producer, who was George's longtime friend and had also produced American Graffiti and THX. He was the only old guy on the set, but everybody else was young and, you know, fresh out of Cal Arts, which is Disney's, or I don't know if they still own it, but was Disney's College of the Production Arts. And, you know, some of them slept there, and there was this department upstairs called rotoscope. And there still are rotoscopes today, although they're digitally done. But the rotoscope is basically how they make the mats, the holdout mats and stuff, and also photograph the matte paintings.
Yeah.
And these guys, I mean, we didn't want to ever go up there because it smelled bad. They were up there all the time. You know, they were college people, but it was that sort of, you know, I mean, I would get up and show up at work at 7 and look up a few minutes later, and it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I didn't know where the time went. It was that sort of glorious, wonderful job. That's
the glorious job, isn't it? To have something.
Yeah, it is.
I tell you, it's really interesting. You mentioned 1977 because with Trey Ratcliffe started his new series of shows, and he was talking about going to see the very first Star Wars, and he said 1977. I thought, he's got that date wrong, surely. And it is amazing how time has literally just gone so fast. 1977, the first Star Wars movie came out. And it was a little while before the next one came out after that, wasn't it? It was about
a couple of years. I think it was 2 or 3 years, something like that. Yeah. And
I was thinking, this is just truly amazing. Where has that time gone from 1977 to 2016? It's just mind blowing.
It's a lifetime.
Hell of a long time, isn't it? Let's not talk about age here. You know,
okay.
So let's talk about this photographic experience now whilst on the Star Wars. It sounds as though a friend of yours had taken the camera and you thought you'd jump on board.
And here I had a job that was paying me pretty well, so I went and bought a camera. It was this here in Los Angeles, actually in Hollywood. There was a camera shop on Sunset, and I went in to buy a camera. And you know, I come from a blue collar background. I didn't want to buy a brand new one. I didn't, you know. So I bought a used camera, and it was a Nikon knockoff called the Nicker Mat, and this was the EL model, which was, I've since read, one of the first electronic cameras, SLRs, that went into production.
That's right.
And the guy told me that the previous owner was Sonny Bono.
No.
Of Sonny and Cher. Now, I have no proof. I have no way to, but that's what he said. He goes, I believe.
Bloody good salesman, because you obviously bought the camera.
Sold it. He said, he goes, he was in here 2 weeks ago. He wanted to get I think at the time it was an F1.
Right.
Or just a Nikon F. I think they were just the Fs at the time.
That's right, F, and then it went FM, and then
Yeah. So I bought it, and it had a 50 millimeter lens, and I started taking pictures of everything. Now, we had a deal that we could, whatever personal film that we had, we could tag on the back end of the company's weekly film run. They had film runs 2-3 times a week, but the photographers could only tag it on to Fridays, and therefore we would get our film done for nothing. Now, the downside of it was all the negatives were done, and with we would get either slides, RGB slides for color, or a contact sheet for black and white.
Okay.
And if you then wanted to take the negatives and print them into photos, you could do that.
Yeah.
Not a bad deal, because film
not a bad deal at all
was expensive. So, and you know, whatever you got, you could tell what you got. So that's where actually there's a couple of pictures up on the website that Andy, I found the pictures and the negatives, and Andy turned me on to a place, I forget where it is, that does high-res scanning. Okay. So we had them scanned at high-res, and Andy Wheeler kind of restored them. He cleaned them up. He did a great job. He rebuilt the nose of the TIE Fighter. So I ended up, I mean, I had more, and 40 years comes and goes, and you don't know where stuff is. They might still be somewhere in the garage. But these are the ones that I found. So so I took pictures of everything, and I took pictures of the models. I took pictures of the costumes. I took pictures of the people who were working on it all, who almost immediately found me annoying to do. What are you pointing the camera at me? I don't like pictures taken, but I did it anyway, and I had a great time.
Great learning curve, and that EL is basically, although it was an electronic camera, I've got the Nikon F up there, which was an earlier. Wow. Around about the time. Manual camera, basically. Was there a light meter in there?
Basically. I mean, there was an auto on it, which was more or less of how I learned. But, in those days, I learned what the rule of thirds was. I learned, what the different priorities on the button were. And I would play around. I mean, a lot of it was shot on auto. But again, you see, Paul, I never thought of myself as creative. My brother was the concert musician, and genius and all that stuff. I was the schlepper. I was I could hit a baseball. I could tackle a guy in football. I could do more chin-ups than anybody else. I could run fast. But I was never the creative one until later, way later. So, I mean, I took pictures, and people would look at them and go, "Oh, that's nice," and then move on. So, exactly, it was on and off for the next bunch of years until later on, when I was working in. By the way, right after Star Wars, I needed to fail for a while, so I became an actor for 13 years. Searching, there was something inside of me always searching for a creative outlet. And I was good in class, but out of 13 years, I made my living at it only one of those years, because I happened to do a national commercial that played during the Olympics here in Los Angeles in 1984. And later, after I came back to working in actually at the time I was working in large format optical effects, IMAX, show scan, 70 millimeter film, big, wonderful. Film is so big when it's so wonderful when it's big. And that's when I ended up picking up the camera again to take pictures and really kind of learn what is this, because not because I needed some sort of outside stroke, but more because whatever that was inside of me that was looking for an expression, you know, drove me to it. And that was where I discovered Ansel Adams and a guy named Galen Rowell, who was one of the guys who was right before Art Wolfe, and did Galen Rowell. To this day, I'll never forget it. There's a book. I'm sure it's out of print, but you can get it from his estate. Has a website called Mountain Light. Now, this is a guy that would climb mountains and take pictures. He died in a plane crash with his wife on the way to a location, I think in Nepal, but I don't know. But you know, you had mentioned when we talked earlier about my first inspirations, and it was those three guys: Ansel Adams, Galen Rowell, and still to this day, Art Wolfe is still one of my heroes. And I would dream of someday doing that. You know, I wanted to do that.
It's interesting. I've never heard of Galen Rowell, but I've just plugged him up quickly on Amazon. You can buy a retrospective. It's a paperback. It came out in 2008. The hardcover is 30 sterling, and the paperback you can get for around about £28. So there's still his work around to look at. I've never heard of him. I'd be interested to have a look at it. But you've mentioned two, well, top slot photographers there. Ansel Adams, which I think is, you know, without doubt, one of the greatest landscape photographers of all time, and Art Wolfe as well, who has won so many awards with his photography.
He's got like 60 books out. He's just.
I know, it's amazing. Truly amazing. I know. Yeah. It's truly amazing. I've seen him being interviewed. Trying to get him on the show, but not so luck so far. But I will keep trying.
In one of the courses that he's done, he explains that he's in the Galapagos. And he crawled down on the cliffs to capture the iguanas who spend all day underwater and come up onto the rocks to warm in the sun. And they sneeze to get all the salt out of them. And he paints this fairly graphic picture, and he goes, "Look, so that's so there I am on there and covered with salty snot." And he says, "Is that the life you want?" And I looked around and went, "No, man."
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's interesting because
how can I get there?
My guest 2 weeks back was Chris Weston, who's a famous nature and wildlife photographer in this country. And we started to talk about gear, and I thought, well, we're going to start talking about 8200, 100-400 type zoom lenses, this sort of thing. No, 50mm lens this guy's used. And I said, sorry, Chris, back up. Tell me how you did it. Exactly right. And he's dug pits for the wildebeest to jump over him. He's got out of the truck and he's approached elephants as they're thinking about charging. He's got into water to photograph the hippos. And I'm thinking, Jesus, you know, this is just amazing work. But we digress onto other photographers there. But those three, I've just seen Galen Rowell there. It's not a familiar name that I've seen before. So look forward to looking at that. And again, Ansel Adams, I saw an exhibition of his about, it must have been about 3 years ago. Massive prints, you know, we're talking 5 meter prints. And this guy was standing next to me looking at the print, and he went right up close to it within about 2 foot. And he went, very grainy, aren't they? I said, well, they would be at that distance. When you go back about 8 foot to 10 foot and look at them properly.
When you think that print was probably the negative of that print was probably a piece of glass.
Exactly right. It was either a 6x6 or a 10x8 plate camera. Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, we're talking turn of the century, you know, early 20s, 30s photographer, and at this point, blown up to 5-6 meters. You know, I should have resolution like that. A bit grainy. You know.
I couldn't believe the guy's comment. I said, "Go away." You know, you don't know what you're talking about. Go and sit back about 10 yards and have a look at it properly. Yeah. It's amazing how people view images like that. I tell you what we'll do. Why don't we go to a screen share, and then because I want to once we've done the screen share of your work, Caleb, I think we can then sort of work out, go back and then discuss how you furthered into it. And obviously, as we know, we're both members of the Arcanum,
Yes.
and we can talk about that and your interest, how that's developed through that.
That's good. Yeah.
This is just the viewers can see now that book that I've just found very, very quickly, Galen Rao, which is a retrospective available on Amazon. So there you go. That's just sort of a confirmation that it's there.
Yeah, and you can probably find, if you don't want to buy the book, you could probably. I mean, he has a website, and if you Google up Galen Rao, and there'll be pictures there. Yeah, I mean, they're just gorgeous. He had a true gift.
Yes, yeah. I'm definitely going to have a look at him later on. So this is your website, and it's a really lovely, lovely website. We've gone straight to the portfolio. I'm going to click on the very first one. So I asked you just before we came on the show, where actually would you pitch your photography? If someone says, what sort of photography do you take, Caleb? What would be the answer to that?
You know, I mean, the short answer would be I'm mostly a landscape photographer, but I'm finding, you know, I really love macro. I really love street, and you know, it's like distribution of time and energy and stuff like that. But just this picture in particular, just a brief, because there's something that's particularly meaningful about this picture is that I climbed up to get it, and got caught by behind me is a bunker and a huge antenna and a group of. There's a small cadre of police that guard it called infrastructure, and I got caught. And to make a long story a little shorter, I was not just befriended but adopted by these guys. So I got to go up 5, 6, 7. In fact, when the last time when Trey was in Los Angeles, I brought him, Stuart, and Renee up as a treat. And you can't get up there. It's fenced in, and it's high security. And not only that, but all the residents around the place, they've put up. I mean, they made such a stink that you cannot Google Maps your way up there. Google took them off. Won't give you directions. Now, the thing that ties this in is that this very spot that I took the picture from used to be one of their comrades' favorite place to sit. Now, this particular gentleman was a true warfare hero. He was a Marine Corps corporal. Actually, I think he became major. I'm not sure about the rank. A 20-year veteran in every single excursion, and those include all the ones that we don't hear about because they don't broadcast about them. Had more when he retired from the Corps. He had more medals than he could fit on his chest. And about 9 months before I took this picture, he had died of pancreatic cancer.
Oh, no.
And they asked me, when I got caught, they said, you know, a picture from that spot would be a great tribute because they have a tribute to him on their wall in the bunker.
Oh, lovely.
And they asked me if they could buy a print, and I told them absolutely not. And Andy helped me with this a bit in the editing of it. And this picture now hangs as part of a tribute to this fallen hero. When I brought it up, they cried.
Oh, no.
And so that's the brief part of the story. You know, you really can't get to take this picture unless.
No, I was going to say when I saw it, I thought that's an unusual position because I think I've heard a similar story where someone tried to take a photograph from this position because you got the beautiful city at the background there, and the security guard said, "No way, Jose, you know, get off this land." So it's a beautiful picture, and the editing is being done beautiful set. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next images. This is
the 3rd Street Bridge in Los Angeles, and you know, it's an iconic bridge. Everybody kind of takes the picture, and they take the picture not because there's actually 2 bridges, and and most people don't. Although I'm finding on Instagram quite a few do, but I hadn't up until this point seen it, taken this perspective of it. And plus, that great big moon was up there, so I wanted to get the shot. Trey has a picture of it, but again, it's usually if you pan to the right, and it includes the freeway, and if you're doing a long exposure at night, you know, you get that trail effect.
Yeah.
So and you know, I mean, I kept it mostly just the way that it is, because I like the perspective that it gives. You know, the leaning buildings give a looming sort of a feeling to it. So yeah, I don't travel around the world, but I make the most of what's around me.
Yeah, I know. That's really a lovely shot again.
Thank you.
Using the light there, and yes, you've got some car movement there, which adds to the bottom half of the picture, the bottom third in actual fact of the picture. It's an interesting shot, looking straight through some.
This is Rockefeller Center. My parents live in Baltimore, and my dad's about to turn 90, so I go at least once or twice a year to visit. And his birthday's in November, so I went to New York because it's my first hometown, and I found this picture. And you know, it's not a perfect picture, but it struck me as almost a perfect Christmas card. You know, it's, you know, that's 30 Rock. That's the Rockefeller Center, and or one of the buildings of it. Rockefeller Center actually takes up a full city block. And then some. So yeah, this just happened, and this isn't, you know, this is an HDR picture, and I just really loved it. You know, they do all the trees around it with the lights, and yeah. Yeah,
we'll talk about the HDR afterwards, because I'm keen to know.
There's the shot. There's the shot that everybody gets.
Yes, the one that everybody gets. Yeah. It's a lot busier than your one, and you know, I have no problem getting the shot that everybody gets. Now this is, I live in Santa Monica. This is not far from where I live, and we get these really amazing sunsets. This is clearly the blue hour, right at about 15 minutes after sunset, and you know, it's a slightly long exposure, so I got the cloud movement the way that I wanted it, and it's from the roof of a hotel. So yeah, I have lived in Santa Monica now for so long that it's you know, and it's an expensive place to live. We're facing the possibility of moving, but it's hard for me to imagine not living near the water. Yeah, I can imagine. Let's just scroll through a few here. So
42nd Street.
Yeah. And
this is a cemetery in Brooklyn. This is also Manhattan. Last year, I forget his name, Scott something. Anyway, he had a photo walk in New York, where I met up with A.D. Wheeler and a couple of people, Murray Park and Lynn Wizicki, and a bunch of people from our cohort, and Scott Whalen.
Scott Wyden.
Yeah, Scott Wyden organized it, so his cohort was there, and we walked around the lower end of Manhattan before going to the Brooklyn Bridge, and we just happened upon this alley with this Buddha. You know, actually, it's not a Buddha. That's a Ganesh.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a Ganesh. And you know, I just found it. I found the oddity of the paradox of it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, truly, if you were looking, if to my imagination, this would be the perfect place for an enlightened being to live. You're in the smack of the lower end of Manhattan in a makeshift garden. You know, a lot of people's homes are like this. So
it's a really interesting shot, because there you got effectively you've got a very, very urban look here. We've obviously found it down an alley, but there's a sort of tranquility about it.
Exactly.
And what makes it is this little statuette, this icon here of the. How interesting to find that. That's amazing. Let's go through a few here, because there's some good images to look at. A little bit of HDR work there as well.
Yeah, this is an abandoned estate in the Santa Monica Mountains.
Yeah, sorry, I've clicked through that one quickly.
No, go right through.
This one I really like. I like this loco wheel. I've taken some photographs of a narrow gauge railway close to where I live, and So I love getting in close on these massive machines.
In Baltimore is the first ever train station built in the United States, and it's now a museum, and that's where I got this.
Interesting. Love it. Lovely shot. And in mono, of course, which is, by the looks of things, not a regular thing for you to do now, unless I'm going to find some later on. Beautiful sunset there with the
Thank you, Manhattan Beach Pier.
Yeah, beautiful.
This is St. Patrick's Cathedral. The last time I was there,
and that reminds me. That reminds me of the cathedral in Barcelona, Sagrada Familia, where when I visited inside, you look at the photographs on the website now of what the Sagrada looks like. It's absolutely fantastic. But when I saw the interior was just like this, scaffolding everywhere, not a single bit of light coming in.
Right.
Fantastic. I love seeing work like that. And there you go. See, I see not a regular mono take, and there's a nice city skyline.
Yeah, another LA from the opposite direction, from south. New York City from the top of 30 Rock.
Yeah, that's right. With the new tower in the background there. So this was it says remember 1969, but
I did that because I punched the colors a little bit.
Yes, and, I see that.
And in 1969, you know, it's a family show, so I won't go into detail. But
no, please.
we used to see colors alike like this a lot.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I was, well, it's not the right thing to say, fortunate enough, but I did go out the World Trade Center back at about the mid-90s, something like that. And I remember a plane flew below me. I couldn't believe it. It was an amazing experience.
They were magnificent.
I'm just putting my cursor over the new tower there. That's down.
I have another shot from across from Brooklyn of the tower as well. There it is.
Look at this.
There it is.
Beautiful work.
Thank you.
Are you doing the majority of your editing now yourself?
Oh yeah. This, by the way, is a redwood.
Yeah.
The great trees in this Sequoia National Forest, they need fires to seed. And it happens to be fires about every 12 or 15 years, and the heat gets so strong that they actually split this great tree in half, and there are quite a few of them. And both halves just keep on growing. So amazing. I got in between them and shot up.
I just realised you've done a nice little thing here with your website. You've just done a brief little description down on when you put the cursor down the bottom. It's a nice little touch, that.
Thank you. This is the Bodie Ghost Town, and and this was one of my, admittedly, this was one of my first, not just HDR, but one of my first, post processing. This was from my first sphere, and that's why I keep it. I mean, if I look at it now, I see I can only see what's wrong with it, but it was my first road trip. Took me 5 hours to get there, and I snuck in. This was another one of asking for forgiveness instead of permission.
It's best way it's done.
This is the first HDR I ever took. This was the picture that I took the first time I ever took any picture, where I stood back and went, who took this? I couldn't have taken this picture. And this was the picture that said, whatever the cost, I have to keep doing this. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's amazing when something happens like that for you, and you get, this is what I want to do.
It was the first time. It was I'll never forget it. And I mean, I see all kinds of problems with it now, but I still keep it just for that. This is an almond grove on the way up to Sequoia, and this is the iconic. Sorry,
gone back. Sorry,
this is the Griffith Observatory.
There should be an S on the end of that, Griffith. If I'm not,
no,
it's the Griffith Observatory.
Yes.
Unlike my surname with the S on then. That's it's an interesting shot there as well. You got a beautifully balanced. It's equal either side there. Lovely.
Yeah. I was definitely going for symmetry. AD is when you go for symmetry. Andy is like,
he's the man.
His motto is, if it ain't spot on, it needs to be.
Exactly right. Lovely old car broken down on the side of the road.
This is the Keys Ranch in Joshua Tree.
Yeah. It's Joshua Tree, right? Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, yeah.
Where I also met up with Andy, and he did this epic road trip last year, and a bunch of the whole cohort met up, and we also met up with John Ielodot, and probably our idol, who's I mean, the guy knows more than most of us. Well, the guy's forgotten more than most of us will ever learn. He's a stunning photographer.
Yeah.
This is, you know, now you're probably close, but I come up from a time when Superman was a television show. Yeah. And the beginning of Superman was a shot of the LA City Hall, which is this building right here, with look up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Yeah. And then when we moved to California, this is the city. Amazing. You know, the dragnet, dun da da. Yeah. You know, so when I saw this from the music center, and it was lit up this way, well, you know,
gotta take it.
You know, it was like, okay, this is that picture I told you about, where, you know, I mean, I'm convinced this is as symmetrical as this is going to get, but like I said, the bridge was the pier was rebuilt so that this is a part of the pier that doesn't match any other part. So
I'm trying to see the bit that where did AD say this?
Upper right hand corner. You see the two pillars in the middle?
Yep.
Well, you know, I don't know if I want to show it to you, because if you don't see it.
No, then, oh yes, the one in the center there is not center on the.
No, that wasn't it. Okay, that wasn't it, because if you look at the one in the center, it's also framed by the two behind it. No, yep. And the one in the center is in fact the center of the frame. But that's part of what I'm talking about, is that it doesn't match because it was rebuilt at a different time than the rest of it was built.
Come on, AD, you can't critique that. That's going too. If he's watching, AD, that's far too critique for me.
He was very kind. He always is.
I bet he was kind. Yeah, he's gone OTT on that critique. I'll tell you.
Needless to say, I went back 4 or 5 more times to try to get what he was talking about, and then somebody said, "Schmuck,
you can't do it.
It doesn't match because it's not supposed to." This is Fire Island.
Yeah.
And just this is also Joshua.
Yeah,
beautiful place. I highly recommend it.
That's a repeat from the last one. Let me just come out of this gallery and let me go down the bottom. Now that is
the Disney Hall.
That's right. Okay, that's not Guggenheim.
No, that's the Walt Disney Concert Hall, done by a different architect.
Right, okay.
And whose name is escaping me at the moment, but he's Frank Gehry.
Frank, Gehry designed the Guggenheim, didn't he? And he designed also a building very similar to this in Bilbao. In actual fact, it's almost an exact match.
I don't know if he did the Guggenheim, but he did do this. I think the Guggenheim was done. Well, I mean, I could be wrong. I didn't really.
I know that Gehry definitely was involved with the Bilbao Museum.
Oh yes,
fantastic. Yes. And it's very, very similar in its design, with this plate-like look of steel
and they say that the concert hall itself is acoustically perfect.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Well, it would be if it's backed by Walt Disney.
This is Lake Hollywood in the dam, and that's another shot. That's the shot that I took with Trey.
I'm with you. Let's just a couple more, and then we'll get back. Let's have a look at this interior here.
This is the
Bradbury Building.
Yes, there it is. It's the Bradbury Building. This is, you know, you may remember Blade Runner.
Yes.
This was the building it was shot in. They also Jack Nicholson did a movie called Wolf, which was they've done probably 200 or 300 different films and TV shows in this place. You know, I'd never done architecture before, and you know, I don't know that I'll ever do it again. But when I saw this building, I had to.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes a lot of people say when you do architecture, everyone says they've got to be upright, you've got to have them horizontal, you've got to have the upright. And I'm not with that school. I like the angles that are created
Yeah,
by looking up with a wide angle lens, or
yeah,
I couldn't possibly afford one of the perspective type cameras, the you
fish
can
eyes
adjust.
and stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. No, the ones where you can adjust the front elements,
Yeah.
get you upright. I couldn't possibly afford one of those. Let's go back as you guys. So your photography's really kicked off after the Star Wars, and then you started getting. But there's a sort of a period of time there before you got involved with the Arcanum.
Well,
When did you
that's
switch
the
from
thing.
film to digital?
It was like 35 years, and you know,
Yeah.
I took family photos, and you know, I felt, I mean, everybody liked them. I felt, again, you know, I knew some of the basic concepts of the, you know, the rule of thirds, and what's the word I'm looking for? You know, you get old, you lose your words, but you know,
Yeah.
I knew the basic concepts of it, and I took, I think, pretty good family photos. But then, you know, both kids were grown up. I had just bought a digital camera, and I had just discovered Trey Ratcliffe. And when I discovered him, I didn't buy it first. I read the HDR course on his website on
Yeah.
Stuff and Custom, and then I took that picture of the pier,
Mhm.
and that was when the epiphany happened. So I followed him more, and when he made the announcement for the Arcanum, I sent emails from 3 different email addresses
Did you?
to get in,
Yes, we did, yeah.
which was a problem later. But I wanted to make sure I got in, and then, you know, the next largest influence, and still influence, on my photography, Andy Wheeler, you know, truly blessed me by accepting me into his cohort,
Mhm.
and you know, I mean, my photography has grown by leaps and bounds under his tutelage. You know, his tutelage and my passion. You know, I'm an older guy now, but the one thing that I've got is that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So,
Mm.
you know, I mean, tomorrow, Friday's my only day off. So when I go to places like that Yosemite shot, I went for the day. Well,
Yeah.
tomorrow I'm going to go up to Big Sur. I'm going to leave at 2 in the morning, and I'm going to come back at 2 in the morning. But, you know, so yeah, it's just, my life is
It's
blessed.
become a major influence on your life. But the point that which I was coming around to is the fact that now you are a trained yoga teacher, and you've been doing that for over 20 odd years now.
Yeah.
So that obviously, and I'm obviously glad to hear it's keeping you busy as well with that side of things. How much have you found the influence of yoga into your photography, or is it the other way around? Is yoga?
No. You know, like I said, when I started back with my spiritual quest, or really quest to find myself, really, back in the 70s. You know, yoga was, because I spent 25 years in martial arts before I got to yoga. And it's always been, you know, my voice always, throughout my teens and my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, my voice always came from somewhere inside my body. And yoga not only cultivates that, it helps me bridge the gap between the inner life and reality, and the outer life, because the goal of yoga is always liberation. Liberation from what? Well, liberation from the glasses, the filters that we all wear, that are made up of our beliefs, which are comprised largely of how we were raised, the culture that we were raised in. You know, we all have these shoulds and shouldn'ts in our lives.
Yeah.
And we look at life through that stuff. So yoga brought me to a place inside myself, yoga and meditation, because I meditate every day, of quiet and stillness. And photography is my bridge. It is my, you know, what they used to call back in the day, there's actually a film called Rainbow Bridge, which I also had something to do with, but I won't digress. It's the bridge between the quiet that I sometimes feel. And for instance, there's a shot on my website. It's actually the shot that won the Creation Wars when that was still going on in a shot from the top of Morrow Rock in the Sequoia National Forest, and it looks out over the valley, and the clouds are pouring in over the mountains. It's a black and white shot, and at one point it actually looks like they're pouring over a ridge. You could see the motion. I went up there and found it, and first I had to sit. You know, there were 5 other people up there. Nobody spoke a word. In the hour I was up there, the only sound you could hear was the sound of my shutter and the wind. Nobody spoke when they got up there. See, that to me is that's what photography is about.
I can totally understand what you're saying, because that landscape photography is not my thing. You know, I love getting out on the street and walking through the streets and listening to the sounds of people and looking up at the architecture, that sort of thing, and looking for the odd abstract on a wall or anything else that I can find, for instance. But it's interesting you mentioned a couple of points there, because speaking to Karen Hutton, Les Imgrund, you know Les, who's the one of the masters down in Australia there, and they say exactly the same thing. And I think Trey's said this as well, along with Jay Patel.
Yes.
They all said the same thing. Landscape photographers have a tendency to set themselves up, or basically get to a spot and just sit and soak it all in, and just sort of, as you said, probably go into a meditative state and just soaking it all in and hearing the sounds, and then eventually get to a situation, as Karen says, right, okay, I've now got the story, I'm now going to record it, and away I go. Now,
yes. Now I got to tell you, because I've seen your work, and I love your work, by the way, Paul. That you know, I've dabbled a little bit in street photography. I have one shot on the website, and I mean to do more, because I mean I grew up in the street. I grew up in the streets of the Bronx in New York, and later Manhattan, and there's a rhythm, there's a pulse, it's an ever-changing moment that shapes itself in front of you, and I mean to bring that sort of stillness as a witness. You know, I mean, what's his name? The famous French street photographer,
Henri Cartier-Bresson.
Exactly. Is, you know, he's also someone who, you know, I mean, I went into the landscape guys, but you know, again, that decisive moment, that moment. Because that also fits in, by the way. I actually stole his tagline. There's a guy who grew up, Nicky. He became a monk. His mother was a magazine fashion magnate. I think she founded or his family founded Esquire, and he ended up studying with people like Avedon and some of the others of the time, and then gave it all up to go be a Buddhist monk in Tibet or Thailand. Nicky Voorhees. Anyway, there's a film made of him called Monk with a Camera, and I highly recommend it. But I believe that it's the same thing. You know, when you're on the street and you're taking, your consciousness is already different. It's already more present.
Yeah.
So whatever is going on in your life disappears. Whatever may be going on with your body sort of recedes into the background, and you're right there in the viewfinder or in the scene that's happening in front of you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. It's that kind of, you know, that kind of moment that where the world.
I've heard also just recently talking to some guys. Chris Weston did this in actual fact. Took a blurred shot of the wildebeest charging past him, and Rincy Ruiz, you probably know Rincy's from Los Angeles, another street photographer down there. They go out without their cameras, and they just walk around observing and sort of taking in certain atmospheres and areas which they're doing, just basically, if anything, just to clear their brain and clear their mind of the images that they've taken before. They just want a total fresh start. Chris Weston told me the last time we were talking about that, he's taken the photographs of the wildebeest, which I believe he was commissioned to do, and he was out there for say 4 or 5 days, and in 2 days he'd got all the shots that he needed. Got all the shots he needed of them all charging through the desert or the bush or whatever you want to call it, and he was happy. But then he was sitting there one evening, he was having a drink with some fellas, and he said, "No," he said, "something's missing. I don't know what it is." And that's when he had this idea of just going out without his camera to watch the wildebeest, which was still streaming through on their normal, their normal path. And of course, that's when he realized they're not standing still. They're moving, and he wanted to capture that. And of course, he went back the following day with his 50mm on his camera, stopped the camera down, got the shutter speed around about 1/15th, 1/30th, or 1/60th, that sort of range, and took these fantastic images of the wildebeest charging through. Totally different approach to what he'd done before, and that's because he took the time out to soak the atmosphere in and look at it from a different angle. And I think there's a great learning curve there, I think, for some photographers to do that.
I agree. Definitely.
One of the things I noticed, I've done a street walk this last weekend, and as soon as we met up, all the cameras are out. Look what I've got. I've got this, and I'm done, and taking photos. And myself and my friends who've been on a regular walkabout, I said, just let them go for a bit, and then we'll pull our cameras out when we're about 10 or 15 yards up the street. It's interesting the way they work.
Yeah,
so lovely sort of link you got there, because also I talk to a lot of photographers that are linked with music, and from the music they develop their photography. Rick Salmon is a classic example, and many other guys that I've spoken to have all got a musical background.
I actually do too, but it came from a place from one. I tried to be a musician for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it came from an inauthentic place that I didn't know about until actually I got a camera in my hands.
Yeah.
This latest incarnation of camera, and it was then that I realized that, no kidding, Paul. I had beautiful guitars. I would practice day in, day out, but I couldn't figure out why. If I missed a day, literally a day, that I would forget a song that I'd spent months learning. I couldn't figure out why I could only get to a certain level and never any farther.
Yeah.
And then when it all finally came together in a kind of this wonderfully quiet, small realization, epiphany type of a thing, that, what came together was the reason why I had been doing it. And the reason why I'd been doing it was because I was still competing with my brother. I was a guy that played guitar first. He's a professional musician, and no kidding, he can make you laugh, he can make you cry. And when I finally let go of that, again, this burst of consciousness. So that, I studied clarinet. I learned how to read music for the guitar. I did classical. I did finger picking. I did rock. I did folk. It just disappeared. It's like that part of my life. While I'm sure it fed me, because when I listen to music now, I have a deeper appreciation, because I know what the musician's doing.
Yeah.
And I know how hard the work is that it took him to get there. But that's it. It's no longer a part of my background. What is that you didn't go on them on the website, which I'm actually kind of happy about. But the thing with Star Wars was some of the pictures I took were on, if you remember, Kodak Tri-X pan film.
Yeah.
And they were handheld.
Yeah.
And they were on a dark stage, and damned if they didn't come out pretty clear. They came out pretty sharp. So,
don't you find those? You're talking about. You say you recognize quality of the musician because you went through that process, but at the same time now you can obviously look at a photograph and say, yeah, I can see that guy's put some work.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I can spot the processing, or well, all right, you know, I mean, I won't, but I have a more of an appreciation. You know, this thing Instagram, and there's some pictures on that where, you know, but just this morning I liked the picture, not perfect, not even close to being actually really, 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 really good, but you know, I could see the guy did what he needed to do to get a different point of view,
yeah,
of this scene. I mean, truly, he got a point of view that I had never seen before.
mm-hmm.
And for that, I was, dude, you know, you have my utmost respect. All the technicality around it really pales in comparison to what the point of the picture is.
Yeah,
and you know, I mean, so it's always, and that's the other thing that I love about this is that going back to the influence that yoga has.
Mm-hmm.
This is a practice of mine. This isn't a perfect of mine. You know, this is all about every time I go out, you know, composition, aperture mode, is it HDR, is it not? But more than that, it's the practice of it. Yeah. Okay, I got this shot. What else can I get? How else can I do this? And then I come back and, you know, I'm still in the very early stages of learning post-production. I mean, I'm better at it than I ever was, but I'm good enough at it now to know that I don't know anything about it. You know, the more you know, the more the greater the mystery grows.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's really that. Photography is just one of the most noble practices, and I don't mean noble like better than anything else. I mean noble like it's so worth your time. It's you know, sacred, but again, not like sacred like special. I mean sacred like different than anything else that I do in my life.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because basically I think you'll never ever stop learning about photography, whether it's a new artist or whether it's a new style of photography or whether it's you know, basically a new camera, that sort of thing. But and as you say, like for instance, you've mentioned a photographer today that I've never heard of, and I'll be looking him up and checking him out, and no doubt it'll feed on to someone else. Talking about cameras, I've just dropped that in. What gear are you shooting with at the moment, Caleb?
You know, I was a Nikon, or as you guys say, Nikon man for 38 years.
Yeah.
And after and that was the camera that I took that peer picture with. But you know, I was so happy with the results of the influence that Trey had on me, that that I watched his comparison between his Nikon and his Sony.
Yeah.
And I sold the Nikon and I got a Sony A7 mirrorless. And my go-to lens is their Zeiss 1635. Although I just got the 24 to 240, which is a great lens. It's sharp from front to back. And I have also inherited, gratefully so, Andy's love of vintage lenses, because this camera system is so great. You can put anything on it. So I've got this, what we call the compensator, because it was originally a Minolta lens. It's, oh, thank you, honey. It's 100 to 200 millimeter. It's also macro. It's thoroughly manual, and it's just great fun. It's like this never-ending puzzle to shoot with it. So that's basically my rig. I have this little flash that I barely use, but mostly, and you know, and a couple of different tripods.
Yeah, it's they're really hitting the waves at the moment, the Sony guys. Apparently they've got a new camera coming out, something like an 80 megapixel camera. I don't know how much that's going to cost, but that's the rumor I've heard. So
you know, I'm at this point saving up, you know, which means that, because again, yoga teachers don't make much money. Saving up for my next camera. I'm really just sort of shooting toward the A7R Mark II.
Right.
You know, 42 megapixels. You know, you could blow it up on a building. I mean, really? If I change my mind, I might see about, you know, because I'm sure they'll. Well, actually, I'm not sure. But yeah, you know, that's that's going to be good.
That'd be good enough for what you need to do. It's interesting you mentioned that the size of print from effectively the sensor. At the UK photo show a couple of months back now, there was a photograph taken by Chris Upton, who's going to be coming on my show in a few weeks' time. Awesome. And it was of miners' lanterns on their shells. And if your lantern wasn't there, you're down in the mine. And right. Each lantern is numbered. And it's a fantastic, very atmospheric image, because the story behind these photographs was the fact that the Thorsbury mine was closing down. Wow. But this image from a 1.5 crop sensor, a Fuji X-T1, which I think is a 24 megapixel sensor, the image had been blown up to a print of 3 meters by 2 meters. And I tell you, I did the Ansel Adams 8 inches away from the and I couldn't see an item bit of grain or noise. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. You got to give sort of a nod to the printer in London, Genesis, who did it. But crikey, what an amazing image! And really, I think it's just tantamount what the cameras are like these days.
Some of Trey's pictures, and that includes some of them that were done with that micro 4/3, because he took them with the A6000.
Yeah, that's a 1.5 crop, isn't the A6000 and the NEX7? He took that that's a 1.5 crop.
I mean, he's having them blown up to 6 and 10 feet now.
Yeah, no,
so I mean, look, I'm all for if I could afford an 80 megapixel camera and therefore afford the storage space that it would require to store those photos, because you gotta realize,
exactly,
it ain't just a camera you got to get.
Yeah,
you got to make room for that stuff.
Exactly right, and you got to have a computer that's fast enough to download the stuff when you get it back to to your shop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, we come to the point of the show, Caleb, where I'm going to have to ask you that all-important question. Some guys actually swerve this one; they don't want to say, but who would be your favorite photographer?
Who will be my favorite photographer?
Who is your favorite all-time photographer?
There are so many that I really like. To be absolutely candid and honest, some of my shots, I'm not really a braggart, but there are some of my shots that, and not many of them, to be honest. I've probably got, at this point, probably 100 up on the website, and 20 or 30,000. But there's like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That, I look at them and I went, at least for me, it just don't get better than that.
Yeah.
After that, I could spend half your show telling you, Trey Radcliffe, Ansel Adams is still, feeding my work. Andy Wheeler, some of the people in my cohort are just phenomenal. I mean, awesome. I look at their stuff and they just blow me away.
Isn't that the joy, though, of the Arcanum, where you find it, where you join these cohorts and you sit with these guys and you're very fortunate that they're going to make comment and critique of your work, but then you see their work and you think, wow, not only is that guy taking time to talk about my work and give me some realistic, decent comment and critique, just study their work as well. And I'm in the same stage as you. I'm in Sphere 2 now myself, and I've seen that right the way through from my foundation and Sphere 1 with Valérie Jardin and the street photography cohorts and those photographers. Amazing work. And then, of course, now in Sphere 2, and I'm seeing work which is being created by these guys. Sandra Jordan's work is just amazing work that she's creating. And,
really is.
And Teresa Pilcher, who I interviewed last week. Street photography.
And not only that, she writes. Her blog is wonderful. It so speaks to that spirituality that you and I were just talking about.
Exactly right.
Lisa Speakman, I mean, half the people, Scott Davis, I mean, they just amazing, these people.
The list is really endless, that what we've experienced with this arcanum, and the people that have, in actual fact, have found their path in photography through the arcanum, and have really, their work is now being celebrated and seen, and it's really fantastic.
I feel like I also have to mention Scott Norris. Scott Norris, I have to say, you know, this is a guy who, I mean, no kidding, he turns everyday mundane matter into art, and he does it every single day, day after day after day. You know, he's doing this 365 project, which I am consciously avoiding. But I mean, no kidding, he turned one of these little lamps that hang from the wall that you know you might have above your kid's crib, that you pull the chain to turn it on. He turned that, and it, you know, it just, I mean, the talent. And with all that, sometimes I try not to look at other people's stuff. You know, because as however strong my practice is, you know, the dark side of it is that sometimes the voices in my head use it against me. To you know, what's the sense of getting up out of bed? I mean, this is, you know, that's why I don't go. You know, I'm a member of it's not 500px, but it's the other one, Viewbug, and then I enter their contests, and they send me these constant emails about come vote, look at who the winners are. You know, if you're not telling me I'm the winner, then I don't really want to look, because if I look at how wonderful their stuff is, I'm never going to want to go shoot a camera again. So
exactly.
You know, I got to manage that dark voice that's always with me.
The interesting point you made earlier on, actually, talking about your favorite photographs that you made. There's an interview which I've watched. I've just tried to find it while you've been talking. His name's Matthew Moran. He's also a wildlife photographer. Now, he'll be happy if he's got 6 decent photographs in a year. And when you put that, and he's a professional photographer, when you put that into perspective, that's when you think, hold on a minute, this is what professional photography really is, what it's all about. There's another photographer, David Yarrow. There's another photographer.
I've heard of him.
Same philosophy. Same philosophy. Who would be your inspiration, Caleb?
You know, interesting. You know, I'm inspired every day. I'm inspired by my yoga students. I'm inspired by my children. You know, I'm not just inspired by people who had to overcome a lot. I'm inspired by people who didn't. You know, you know, I mean, truly, there's Art Wolf, and there's Galen Rowell, and there's Ansel Adams, and and Andy Wheeler, and Trey Ratcliffe, and Valerie Jardin. I mean, and they continue to inspire me. But when it really gets down to the work of it, they don't exist. You know, they do their work. What there is to do is mine. And you know, Paul, there's a certain joy to just be in the middle of doing it. So again, I don't want to go, I'm my inspiration, but the smaller voice says, well, yeah, I kind of am, because I get up and there's something inside me. It's not like if I thought about it, I wouldn't. So you see what I mean? It's not the thinking process. It's not the ego part of it. But, you know, sometime tomorrow morning, I'm going to find myself in the car. It's still going to be dark. I'm going to be about a quarter of the way there, and I'll look in the mirror and see this huge grin on my face. And that's the source of the inspiration. Not, you know, that in the middle of it, there's just such joy. Yeah. You know, it occurred to me not long ago. And this is a little bit off the beaten track, but it occurred to me not long ago that I didn't really know what joy felt like. And you know, it's a family thing, but it serves a purpose. So forgive me. At the time, I had been smoking. Not at the time that I had this realization, but in my life, you know, marijuana is fairly legal in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I'm a big exponent of it. I went through a chemical therapy treatment 12 years ago that if I didn't smoke pot, I didn't eat. I had dropped 49 pounds. And, you know, it's so much better than what the pharmaceutical, I mean, there's that whole discussion. I won't go into it. But I found that since I'm a teenager, I enjoyed it. It's better for you than alcohol, blah, blah, blah. I also found that it got in the way of my taking pictures. You know, a lot of creative people, I was listening to an interview with Carlos Santana just this morning about how, you know, he gets high and creates. It's just the opposite for me.
Right.
So when I stopped, yeah, there's, you know, what comes back is the dark side too. But if you can embrace that, because we all have a shadow and it's part of who we are. If you want to be a whole person, it includes the shadow. And since I stopped, there's that moment in the car that happens. And it's pure inspiration. It's, oh my God, I'm on my way to go someplace and be there with it. See, I can't get that from another photographer.
No.
You know, I can't. I mean, I can appreciate, because there's actually a really wonderful documentary on YouTube about Ansel Adams, about some of the trials that he did. You know, this is a guy who's lugging way more thick, heavy equipment up mountains to go take these awesome pictures. And, you know, I mean, yeah, my mind considers that inspiration. You know, that Galen Rowell climbed Everest to take pictures. My mind, my ego says, wow, you know, I want to do that. But for me, at least this recent discovery of where true inspiration comes from is in here.
Yeah.
And I can't get it from someplace outside of me.
Right.
And that, so really, I guess it's the actions that I take. So when, again, not to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, because really, quite frankly, I don't think I'm that great. But in the middle of it, when I'm not thinking of myself, where my ego's not involved, where it's just the pure action of it, see, that's what yoga is. It's skillful action. And it doesn't have to be some sort of crazy, twisty pose. It's skillful action in reality. When I'm in the middle of that action, my heart sings. And that's what I call inspiration. And I just can't get that from somebody or someplace else outside of me.
Yeah. That's nicely put, actually. It's and totally different from what I've heard before by other people I've had.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's got something to do with your yoga and your involvement with that, to be kind, and your meditation as well. Because I've heard people that their inspiration is from their children, their inspiration is from their parents, those natural links, and of course the inspiration from the one photographer which really kicked it off for me, which 9 times out of 10 is either being one of the greats, an Ansel Adams or an Henri Cartier-Bresson. So it's an interesting, different concept to the idea of inspiration. It does make people think about where they've actually come from and where they want to go in the future.
You know, I mean, but in a totally, in truly an ego-free way. You know, I mean, I don't care if I would love if my photography paid for it, but if it doesn't, I'm okay with that. Yeah. I just want to go take pictures, and if I can't go someplace on the other side of the planet and do it, then, you know, I'm driving a Prius because it gets good mileage. I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go drive and do it. So really, you know, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I have a massive ego. I confess, half the time when I post my pictures, and I probably shouldn't say this because I invited them all in Trey's group, from that goes according to this new television thing, this new project that he's doing, Trey's funky group on I invited them all to watch this. Half the time when I post, there's that part of me that's going, okay, is Trey going to see this? Am I going to get liked here? I mean, I still want to be liked. The likes matter to me,
Exactly right.
in my head, in my ego. But this comes from another quieter, more personal, more naked place. I totally agree when he says, you don't discover yourself, you create yourself.
Yeah,
and in moments, that's when that's happening. It doesn't ever happen any other place, because every other place I'm in my head and therefore in my ego. I'm trying to prove something. I'm trying to show it off. I'm trying to, in these moments when it's just me, and there I am in the car on my way to Big Sur, on my way to Yosemite, for Christ's sake, on my way to Sequoias, on my way to Death Valley. Yeah, that's
go for it.
That's the juice.
Caleb, great. We've had a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Little bit of feedback.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, as I say, thanks very much, Andy, for joining me. I really enjoyed talking to you today about your photography and all the other parts of your life which you've been involved with. And we'll keep in touch, obviously, as we do through the Arcanum. But
get another cancellation, call me.
It's great. Thanks for that. You never know. You just never know.
I've seen some of the people that you've had. You honor me with this, and I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, it's no problem at all, because I just like talking to all photographers, be they amateur, just started out, professional, well-known, not so well-known. It's good to hear both sides of that line, where we enjoy and love our photography. It's great to hear all the different stories which everyone has to say about their love of this particular hobby that we partake in. Folks, we've had a number of live viewers as well, Caleb, so I'm really thankful for that. That's been awesome that we've had those people watching. So thank you so much for joining Caleb and myself this evening. It's suffice to say it's Thursday. We've got one more day left. Mind you, Caleb's jumping in his car tomorrow. He's off shooting. Lucky
tonight, yeah.
I've got a day's work still to go for the weekend. But if you are going out shooting this weekend, why not leave your camera bag at home? All the best to you. Bye for now.